Hey guys, Brian Nichols here. This is strength training, Bulgarian versus traditional periodization. Strength can be defined as the ability to exert force. When the body is subjected with increased demands, the neuromuscular system adapts with increases in muscular strength. Speed strength is a combination of these two definitions, i.e., the ability to apply force through a distance divided by the time of force application. So essentially, the definition is this: force times distance over time, which in essence, is the definition of power. Therefore, power is the result of any given dynamic muscular activation, according to Baker, 1995. However, different sports require varying levels of power. The sport of weightlifting in the elements of the pull require high outputs of power during strength exercise training. Unlike weightlifting, though, powerlifting movements are not very powerful, despite heavier weights being lifted in comparison to weightlifting movements. Yet both sports require a great deal of strength. Conversely, many strength coaches have been implementing the training principle of periodization. But what is periodization, or variation as it's more commonly known? So according to Kenny, Wilmore, and Costill in 2015, there are 5 general principles of training, such as the principle of individuality, specificity, reversibility, progressive overload, and variation, also known as periodization. Over the last 75 years, research has provided a substantial knowledge base concerning resistance training and its application to health and sport. Variation or periodization of training is an important concept in designing weight training programs. To date, the majority of studies examining the periodization of weight training have been used as a traditional strength/power model of decreasing training volume and increasing training intensity as these programs progress, according to Fleck, 1999. For almost 25 years, the Bulgarians dominated the sport of weightlifting. For those of you who are not familiar with the Bulgarian system of training, it was developed by the famous Bulgarian weightlifting coach, Ivan Abadjaev, according to Moser, 2011. Unfortunately, there is very little specific research to provide enough data in the current climate. Fortunately, many experts in the strength and conditioning field have broken down the Bulgarian method of training into just a few characterizations. The main characteristic of the Bulgarian method is the training principle of specificity. So my question was this: which method would produce more, the same, or less increases of muscular strength? But in order to do this, further research is needed. The research that's needed in the area of strength gain through both periodization and specific submaximal and maximal training in particular would be the dose-response relationship of such training. Future research may examine the effect of training, including training frequency, meaning more times per week, velocity, meaning at different speeds, or even the accommodating resistance, such as different kinds of resistance, including chains and bands. Additionally, in order to determine the mechanism of strength increases, muscle hypertrophy, electromyography, and mechanicomyography may explain the following training. The purpose of the study was to identify which training methodology could produce more increases in muscular strength. And I hypothesized that if 2 lifters of similar backgrounds and similar number of years trained, utilizing different training methodologies could improve muscular strength more than another method in the same training cycle. Furthermore, would the muscle activation be achieved when maximal weights are lifted, method of maximal efforts, i.e. Bulgarian training, or submaximal weight is lifted, a maximal number of possible repetitions, i.e. periodization? After such time, would the Bulgarian method of training produce more, the same, or less muscular strength than traditional periodization? 22 males who possessed a minimum of 6 months previous weight training experience volunteered and gave consent to participate in the study. Their mean age, height, and body mass were 20 years plus 2.6, height 179.6 centimeters plus 5.7, and 75 kilograms plus 8.4, respectively. Experienced subjects were chosen for this study as they were accustomed to training and testing, and thus the changes induced by training would less likely be influenced by a learning effect in comparison to novice subjects, according to Rutherford and Jones, 1986. So in the training, the subjects were placed into 2 groups. All the subjects in Group 1 performed strength training programs of equal training volume and intensity for 3 days per week for 12 weeks. All the subjects in Group 2 were trained at around 90% of 1 repetition max for 3 days a week for 12 weeks, according to Moser, 2011. Subjects devoted 1 day of training for the bench press, 1 day for the back squat, and 1 day for the deadlift. These training sessions would not be concurrent and at least 1 day between the bench press, back squat, and deadlift. Prior to testing, each subject performed a 5-minute warm-up on the Monarch 868 cycle ergometer, according to Wernberg and Sweden, at a comfortable cadence and workload, according to Kelly et al. 2007. So participants in Group 1 were trained in sets of 6 repetitions for 12 weeks. Participants in Group 2 were trained in sets of 1 repetition for 12 weeks on the bench press, back squat, and deadlift. All the accessory work was completed at 75% of the 1 rep max for each exercise. All groups were pre-tested, mid-tested, and post-tested of training during the 3 training days, and all subjects were retested according to Kelly et al. 2007. Prior to commencement, at the end of the completion of the 12-week training program, the relationship between the various measures of strength and speed strength were determined using a Pearson's product moment correlation. The differences between the measures of muscular function pre to post, the resistance training program, were determined by significance of a paired t-test. The relationship between the changes in strength and strength speed in the measured variables resulting from the training program were also investigated to determine if the mechanism underlying the changes in muscular function were common between the tests. A correlation of R equals 0.71 or greater, indicating 50% or more of the common variance, was chosen to indicate a generality of the strength relationship, according to Clark and Clark, 1970. Statistical significance was set at the 0.05 alpha level for all measured tests, according to Baker et al. 1994. The Bulgarian group, Group 1, exhibited significant increased P is greater than 0.5 in muscular strength on the bench press. The pre was 171 plus or minus 61 newtons. Mid was 193 plus or minus 66 newtons. Between the pre-test and the mid-test, while the periodization group, Group 2, the pre was 163 plus or minus 56 newtons, and mid was 172 plus or minus 61 newtons, slightly increased. Strength did not change between the mid-test and the post-test for any of the groups. However, it was concluded that performing sets of 6 repetitions for 12 weeks was more effective than performing sets of 1 for 12 weeks. The results of this study seem to support previous studies such as Baker, Fleck, and Geyerhammer, Smith, and Ray et al., all of which found performing multiple repetitions per sets of resistance training exercise to be more effective than performing single repetition sets for strength gain. These studies create the scientific foundation for advocating the use of multiple repetition sets as a superior method of resistance training for increasing muscular strength. However, these studies are in conflict with the findings of a small portion of literature, Chestnut, Doherty, and Berger, that found that performing a single set of exercise was effective as performing multiple sets for strength gain. These few studies provide the support for literature, Moser and Befwekla, which possesses using a single repetition sets of resistance exercise in increasing strength. All participants in the current study had very different training volumes, which could heavily influence strength gains. These few studies provided the support for literature Moser et Befwekla, which possesses using a single repetition sets of resistance exercise for increasing strength. All participants in the current study had a very different training volume, which could have heavily influenced strength gains. It is important to note, however, that the relationship between increased volume and increased strength is not linear and not definite, according to Gonzalez and Badillo, 2005. So in summary, while the Bulgarian method seemed to prove significant increases from the pre-test to the mid-test, overall, after the 12 weeks of training, the periodization or variation training methodologies seem to produce more gains in muscular strength. If you would like to see the whole study, you can go to my website at allegiantstrength.com. That's allegiantstrength.com. Thanks.